Rich people who married someone poor. What surprised you the most? Story 1. Even though I don't think it was directly related to how much money they had, their houses were always filthy and there was dog poop everywhere. My partner used to drink sometimes with his mom and sometimes with his dad, and both places were the same. Piles of dirty dishes, grimy floors, and a strong smell of dog pee and cigarette smoke. I remember one time I went to the bathroom at one of his parents' houses and had to spread my legs while sitting on the toilet so I wouldn't step in dried menstrual blood on the floor. It was pretty disgusting. My partner couldn't believe it when, after we got married and started living together, he'd come home from work every day to a spotless house. On the other hand, I once dated a guy whose stepdad was a lawyer, so they lived a pretty luxurious life. The only thing that shocked them about my lifestyle was that I didn't eat pizza with a knife, fork, and a glass of wine. Story 2. Our childhoods were very different in many ways. For example, when it came to Disneyland, I went often and part of the experience was eating the most expensive, delicious food they sold there. My partner never had that chance and had to bring her own food from home. Birthdays and Christmas were the same. I had big parties with lots of friends and tons of presents. She barely got any gifts and didn't really celebrate. These differences gave us very different expectations and reactions to disappointment. Since I never experienced real disappointment as a kid, I didn't mind if something didn't work out. I'd just take the risk anyway. She, on the other hand, had developed a defense mechanism because of constant disappointment growing up. You could say poverty leaves a kind of psychological trauma. Story 3. When his family had guests over for dinner, they would end the prayer before the meal with F.R. Amen. It was a secret code, so the kids knew there wasn't enough food for everyone. F.R. stood for family restriction. They had to take smaller portions and let the guests serve themselves normally. Despite their financial struggles, they were always incredibly generous with friends and never let lack of money stop them from hosting. I definitely married the right person. Story 4. I fell in love with my best friend from college. He came from a very humble family. When I got my first job, I decided to plan a vacation and invite him to spend my birthday together. He has no idea I'm in love with him, though I think it's pretty obvious. Maybe I should just tell him. Story 5. I dated a girl for a while who grew up in a really tough home. I'm still shocked at how badly she managed money, racking up credit card debt like it was nothing. Sometimes I honestly can't understand how someone can spend so much without thinking about the consequences. Story 6. My husband grew up in a family where, although they had the basics, they lived on a very tight budget, 6 kids and a disabled mom. In my family, we never had those restrictions. One day at the supermarket, I noticed he always insisted on walking down every single aisle, making grocery shopping take forever. I finally asked why. That's when he told me that as a kid in a big, poor family, they rarely had enough money for food, so he had to give up a lot of things he wanted. Now that he can finally buy whatever he wants, he loves taking his time looking at and choosing everything he couldn't have before. I was surprised it took him more than 10 years of marriage to tell me that story, and I felt bad for not noticing sooner. Story 7. Sandwiches. When I made my partner a sandwich with just one thin slice of ham, he couldn't believe that was how I'd made sandwiches my entire childhood. Story 8. Hearing my husband, then boyfriend, say before we got married, "I finally paid rent today," meaning he had earned or saved enough that month to cover it. I realized what a real struggle it is when you don't have a fixed salary. Story 9. Back when he was still my boyfriend, My husband took me to a nice restaurant. The waiter prepared a Caesar salad at the table and asked if I wanted pepper. I said yes. I didn't know I was supposed to say stop when I had enough. My boyfriend noticed, but stayed quiet to see what would happen. By the time he told me, it was too late. There was literally a mountain of pepper on the salad. I just thought that's how Caesar salads were. It was my first time eating one that wasn't just iceberg lettuce and ranch dressing. There was way too much pepper. Story 10. I was adopted at 7 after living in extreme poverty. Suddenly I was living with a doctor who bought birthday and Christmas presents. I didn't even know that existed. I literally didn't know you could walk into a store and buy whatever you wanted. Story 11. Compared to my wealthy in-laws, my family is pretty poor. We have 2 small kids, and my wife was shocked when I said we should look for clothes and toys at local flea markets and garage sales. It had never occurred to her that you could save money buying good used items. She'd never been to a garage sale in her life. Now she loves them and checks if something is worth buying secondhand before going to Amazon or a regular store. Her parents, however, think it's disgusting that we let our kids wear clothes another child wore before. Story 12. What surprised me most about my partner was her food insecurity. When we got married, she would get visibly anxious if we were running low on food at home. She never overate, but she was always worried. Later she told me that as a kid, she often went hungry. On a funnier note, she hates camping. My answer is always, I camped because it was fun. Hers, I camped because we couldn't afford hotels. Story 13. She and her mom lived with her grandfather, so they wouldn't become homeless. He was the only one with a house. She was paying for college with credit cards and racking up debt. So while we were dating, I paid off her cards, about $1,300. She cried because of how kind that was. I bought a condo, we got married, then bought a house. I never thought of myself as rich until I started dating her and realized that going out to dinner could be a real luxury for some people. Story 14. Even though he earned good money, he came from a humble background and had no idea about budgeting or retirement plans. It almost seemed like he never planned to retire. He started piling up credit card debt despite his salary. Over time, he's improved a lot, even more than me. Now he loves budgeting and is excited about early retirement. Story 15. While he was growing up, the general mindset in his community was that insurance, especially car insurance, was only for rich people. Most people he knew just drove without it like it was completely normal. Story 16. We didn't end up getting married, but when we started dating, she always preferred to be at my place instead of hers, which I thought was weird. In just a few months, she gained over 35 pounds. She started at around 100 pounds. I didn't see it as a bad thing. I'm also on the heavier side, and I was just glad she wasn't pregnant. Later I understood. Sometimes her family couldn't afford dinner, so when she had a place where she could eat every night, she would stuff herself because she knew there might be nothing at home. Story 17. My partner and I are both poor, but in different ways. She never experienced homelessness or real hunger. I did. She's extremely frugal and hates buying anything we don't need. I feel a desperate urge to stockpile food whenever we have extra money. I struggle not to fill the house with canned and dry goods just in case we can't afford groceries next month. Deep down I know it's irrational, but my childhood instinct says there was never enough. Story 18. I'm not rich at all, but my husband comes from a very poor village in rural Mexico. He used to bathe in the street because there was no plumbing, and he used leaves as toilet paper. I mean, there's poor, and then there's my husband's childhood. I've lived in the US for over 12 years, but when we met it was fascinating seeing the world through his innocent eyes. Going to the movies was a huge event. Using a microwave was completely new to him. Staying in nice hotels on vacation still blows his mind sometimes. Story 19. She hates food stamps now because that was her dinner 5 nights a week growing up. I had never seen food stamps until college, and when I discovered them I thought they were amazing. 10 burgers for $10 deals were incredible. Story 20. One of my exes could earn easily double or more what I made, but he was terrible at saving. He knew how to set himself up as a company to pay lower taxes, but then paid a fortune every month to an accounting firm he didn't trust and ended up doing all the taxes himself anyway. He took taxis across the city or rented cars instead of public transport. Flight canceled. No problem. He'd just book another one and never bother claiming insurance. He'd buy a sports car, wreck it, and sell it for scrap. He worked contracts, then took long breaks to work on his startup while spending every weekend buying drugs and alcohol. At first I thought it was wild and fun, but when he became my fiancé, I started feeling like his mom. Story 21. I'm not rich, but my husband grew up poor. Sometimes I just want rice and vegetables for dinner, and he's like, absolutely not. I'm never going back to that. My dad was the opposite. Grew up poor, built a successful business, but still spends almost nothing on food. If I let him, he'd eat cheap instant ramen every day and says his favorite food is rice pudding. Story 22. My experience is the reverse. I was the poor one. I was stunned by how my wife reacted when something broke, car, appliance, clothes, etc. Growing up poor, a flat tire or any basic repair was a disaster. We'd have to juggle bills or just live with it. When my wife's phone broke, I panicked, but she just said, "Okay, let's go buy a new one this afternoon." And we did. Story 23. What always surprised me was how many pets my partner's family had and how much of their income they spent on them. But pets give unconditional love, and that's priceless when you don't have much else. Even though it looked like they couldn't afford it, they never skimped on vet care or food for their animals. The emotional support those pets provided was worth everything. Story 24. I had a short relationship with a girl from the top 1% in the US. She was shocked that I had no problem walking into fast food restaurants. We stayed friends, and her parents were incredibly generous. I told them I was working summer jobs to save for a graduation trip, and money would be tight the following year. I dreamed of doing a safari if I saved enough. Even though I'm upper middle class, they paid for the entire trip just because I'd helped their daughter move into her apartment. Totally unexpected, but very much appreciated. Story 25. I'm not rich by any means, but my husband is still amazed by how I survived on half the minimum wage in 2011, my stubborn determination to be the first in my family to graduate college, and the fact that I didn't know what spinach tasted like until our second date, along with many other foods. He always took me to super expensive restaurants, and it was overwhelming seeing foods I'd never even heard of on the plate.